when a young hotshot CEO dismissed an aging Hollywood legend for looking too old. He had no idea the storm he was about to unleash. In the cutthroat world of film production, appearances matter, but so does respect, and some legends don't fade quietly into the night. Comment where you're watching from today as we dive into this incredible story of ego, humility, and the mistake that cost a rising executive everything he had worked for. In the gleaming headquarters of Pinnacle Pictures, the morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. The building itself was a testament to success. 40 stories of glass and steel rising above the Los Angeles skyline, housing one of Hollywood's fastest-growing studios. Inside, executives in tailored suits hurried through corridors lined with posters of blockbuster hits, their footsteps echoing in the vast atrium, adorned with awards and memorabilia. On the 38th floor, the executive suite buzzed with anticipation. Alexander Reynolds, Pinnacle's 35-year-old CEO, had built his reputation on revolutionary thinking and ruthless efficiency. Handsome and Harvard-educated, with a perfectly trimmed beard and designer glasses, Reynolds represented the new guard of Hollywood, tech-savvy, algorithm-obsessed, and utterly convinced that the old rules no longer applied. "The numbers don't lie," Reynolds announced to his boardroom of nodding executives. "Our market research shows audiences want younger, fresher faces. The days of aging action heroes are over." He swiped through a presentation on his tablet, graphs and charts displaying viewer demographics splashed across the room's massive screen. "Our next project needs to appeal to the 18 to 35 demographic. That's where the streaming numbers are strongest." Meanwhile, in a modest ranch house nestled in the hills of Carmel by the sea, a different kind of morning routine was unfolding. Clint Eastwood, the iconic actor and director whose career spanned over 6 decades, sat on his porch sipping black coffee. At 94, the lines on his face told stories of countless roles, from the man with no name, to Dirty Harry, to award-winning director. His weathered hands cradled the mug as he reviewed the script that had arrived by courier the previous evening. The offer from Pinnacle Pictures had come as a surprise. Legacy, the working title read, a story about an aging detective coming out of retirement for one last case. Eastwood had been semi-retired himself, selectively choosing projects that spoke to him. There was something about this character that resonated, perhaps the themes of age, wisdom, and being underestimated. He had agreed to the meeting more out of curiosity than necessity. Back at Pinnacle, Reynolds' assistant hovered nervously at his office door. "Mr. Reynolds, your 10 o'clock is here. Mr. Eastwood is waiting in the lobby." She paused, adding with barely contained excitement, "It's actually him, Clint Eastwood." Reynolds barely looked up from his screen. "Have security bring him up. And Jessica, remember what we discussed. This is a courtesy meeting. The role's already been reconsidered." He straightened his tie, practiced his camera-ready smile in the reflection of his monitor, and prepared for what he considered a formality. When Eastwood entered the office, the contrast between the two men couldn't have been more stark. Reynolds stood behind a minimalist desk of glass and chrome, surrounded by digital awards and framed magazine covers featuring his own face. Eastwood moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had nothing to prove, his tall frame still commanding despite the slight stoop of age, his gaze still intense beneath the prominent brow. "Mr. Eastwood," Reynolds extended his hand with the practiced warmth of someone who had mastered the art of the business greeting. "It's an honor. Thank you for coming all this way." "Call me Clint," the actor replied, his voice the familiar gravelly rumble that had delivered some of cinema's most memorable lines. "Nice building you've got here." Reynolds gestured to a sleek leather chair. "Please, have a seat. Coffee? Water?" Without waiting for an answer, he pressed a button on his desk. "Jessica, 2 sparkling waters." The small talk was brief and perfunctory. Reynolds spoke rapidly about Pinnacle's vision, their innovative approach to storytelling, their commitment to redefining the cinematic landscape. Eastwood listened, saying little, those famous eyes taking in not just the man's words, but the way he delivered them, with practiced precision, but little genuine passion for the art of filmmaking itself. "So," Reynolds finally said, tapping his tablet screen, "about the project we sent over, Legacy." I'll be direct because I respect your time. We've decided to go in a different direction. Eastwood raised an eyebrow slightly. Different how? After extensive market analysis, we've determined the lead character needs to be younger, more relatable to our target demographic. Reynolds' smile never faltered. The script has tremendous potential, but we're recasting with someone who can carry potential sequels, merchandise opportunities, social media engagement. I see, Eastwood said simply. No offense, but the audience for older protagonists is shrinking. Today's viewers want heroes they can follow for a decade of films. Reynolds leaned forward, his voice taking on a confiding tone. Between us, the insurance costs alone for an actor of your experience would impact our bottom line. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Reynolds, used to people filling uncomfortable silences, continued talking. We could consider you for a smaller role, perhaps. A mentor figure who exits in the first act. Your name on the poster would still carry weight with the older demographic. When Eastwood finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. So, you invited me here to fire me from a role you'd already offered? Reynolds straightened. I wouldn't put it that way. We're evolving the project. Hollywood is changing, Mr. Eastwood. Algorithms and analytics drive decisions now, not gut feelings. Viewers want youth, energy, constant action. They want stars they can follow on Instagram. And you think I look too old for the part? Eastwood stated it as fact, not a question. Well, yes, the camera isn't kind to aging faces in 4K. Reynolds gestured vaguely. We need someone who looks vital, dynamic. Our research shows audience discomfort with mortality reminders in entertainment. It's not personal, it's business. Eastwood stood slowly, towering over the desk. I've been in this business since before you were born, son. Seen studios rise and fall, outlasted executives who thought numbers could tell stories better than people. He placed the script gently on the desk. Good luck with your project. As he turned to leave, Reynolds called after him, unable to resist a final assertion of his philosophy. The industry's evolving, Mr. Eastwood. Legends have their place, but that place is in the past. We're focused on the future here. Eastwood paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. The hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth, reminiscent of countless iconic moments when his characters knew something others didn't. We'll see about that. With those 4 simple words hanging in the air, he walked out. Reynolds sat back in his ergonomic chair, already moving on mentally to his next meeting. He pulled up his phone, dismissing the encounter with a tweet about Pinnacle's commitment to fresh faces and bold new visions. Outside his office, whispers spread among the staff about the Hollywood legend who had come and gone so quickly, and about the young CEO who had just made the decision to pass on one of cinema's most enduring icons. What neither man knew was how quickly their paths would cross again, and how dramatically the power dynamic would shift. For in Hollywood, respect isn't just given freely. It's earned through decades of resilience. And sometimes, those who are too quick to dismiss the past find themselves disconnected from their own future. News travels fast in Hollywood, faster still when it involves a living legend. By nightfall, Reynolds' dismissal of Eastwood had spread through industry circles like wildfire. The young CEO remained oblivious, celebrating what he considered another decisive business move with colleagues at an exclusive rooftop bar in downtown Los Angeles. Champagne flowed freely as Reynolds held court, detailing his vision for Pinnacle's future. The old guard had their time, he proclaimed, gesturing expansively to the glittering city below. But nostalgia doesn't pay the bills. Data does. His entourage of young executives nodded appreciatively, smartphones constantly buzzing with notifications none of them dared check while the boss was speaking. Meanwhile, across town at Chateau Marmont, a very different gathering was taking place. Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Meryl Streep sat with Eastwood in a secluded corner of the garden. These weren't just colleagues. They were friends who had navigated the treacherous waters of Hollywood together for decades, creating art that defined generations. He actually said you were too old? Streep asked, incredulous. To your face? Eastwood's weathered features crinkled into a smile. Said the camera isn't kind to aging faces in 4K. He sipped his whiskey, neat. Kid probably thinks Unforgiven was a Marvel movie. Scorsese shook his head. These tech executives think they can reduce art to algorithms. They don't understand what connects with an audience isn't youth, it's truth. Remember when studios valued experience? Spielberg mused, when craft mattered more than social media followers? Times change, Eastwood replied simply. Always have. What none of them realized was that at a nearby table, Margaret Chen, chairwoman of Pinnacle's parent company, Global Media Ventures, was dining with international investors. The respected industry veteran had caught snippets of their conversation and found herself increasingly troubled by what she was hearing. As dawn broke over Los Angeles the following morning, Alexander Reynolds arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant Jessica met him at the elevator, her expression tense. "Morning, sir. You have 17 messages from the board. Ms. Chen's office has called 5 times, and these arrived." She handed him a stack of entertainment industry publications. Each headline told the same story. Pinnacle CEO dismisses Eastwood, too old for Hollywood. Reynolds snubs cinema icon, ageism in action. Hollywood legends rally around Eastwood after Pinnacle rejection. Reynolds' face darkened as he flipped through the pages. This is ridiculous. It was a simple business decision backed by data. He tossed the publications onto his assistant's desk. "Get me PR on the phone. We'll release a statement clarifying our position." Jessica hesitated. "Sir, there's more." The Writers Guild issued a statement this morning. Several A-list directors have announced they're reconsidering their projects with us, and #Respect the Legends is trending worldwide. Reynolds loosened his tie slightly. "It'll blow over. Cancel my morning meetings. I need to draft a response." Before Jessica could reply, his office phone rang. She glanced at the display. "It's Ms. Chen, 3rd time this morning." The conversation was brief and one-sided. Reynolds mostly listened, his expression growing increasingly strained. When he hung up, he stared out at the Los Angeles skyline for a long moment. "Jessica, clear my schedule. I'm needed at Global Media headquarters immediately." Global Media Ventures occupied the top floors of a century-old building in the heart of Hollywood, a deliberate contrast to Pinnacle's modern glass tower. The boardroom where Margaret Chen waited exuded old-world gravitas, wood-paneled walls adorned with vintage movie posters, a massive table that had allegedly hosted meetings with Hitchcock and Kubrick. Chen herself embodied this blend of tradition and power. At 72, the former studio executive had navigated Hollywood's evolution through multiple eras, gaining respect not by chasing trends, but by recognizing timeless quality. She sat at the head of the table, several board members flanking her, all wearing expressions that made Reynolds' confidence waver for the first time. "Alexander," Chen didn't stand as he entered. "Please sit." Reynolds adjusted his tie, summoning the self-assurance that had carried him to the top. "Margaret, if this is about the Eastwood situation, I can explain our data-driven approach." "This isn't about data," Chen interrupted. "It's about judgment. In less than 24 hours, you've alienated half of Hollywood's creative community, triggered a boycott threat from the Directors Guild, and caused our stock to drop 6 points in pre-market trading." Reynolds opened his tablet. "I have the analytics that supported—" "Put that away," Chen said sharply. "Some decisions can't be justified with spreadsheets. Clint Eastwood isn't just an actor. He's an institution, a connection to cinema history that resonates with audiences across generations. Our demographic research shows that authenticity matters," she finished for him. "Yes, I've reviewed your data, but you misinterpreted it. Young audiences don't reject older actors. They reject inauthenticity. Eastwood's appeal has never been about looking young. It's about his gravitas, his earned authority." A board member slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of social media trends, all overwhelmingly negative toward Pinnacle and supportive of Eastwood. "We've invested billions in Pinnacle because we believed in balancing innovation with respect for cinematic tradition," Chen continued. "Yesterday, you demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of our industry's ecosystem." Reynolds felt the ground shifting beneath him. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Chen replied. "I'm telling you that as of this morning, the board has voted to place you on administrative leave pending review. Your single-minded focus on algorithms over artistry has created a crisis of confidence we cannot ignore." Reynolds sat stunned, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. This is an overreaction to one casting decision. No, Alexander. It's a necessary response to a pattern of decisions that reveal a fundamental disconnect with what makes stories resonate. Chen's voice softened slightly. You're brilliant with numbers, but this industry was built by people who understand that some values can't be quantified. As security waited to escort him from the building, Reynolds realized too late the magnitude of his miscalculation. He had dismissed not just an actor, but a symbol, and in doing so, had revealed his own failure to grasp the very essence of the business he claimed to revolutionize. The Los Angeles morning unfolded with uncharacteristic gloom, gray clouds hanging low over the city as Alexander Reynolds sat in his Malibu beach house, staring at his silent phone. 24 hours had passed since his unceremonious escort from Pinnacle headquarters. His social media accounts, once bustling with industry engagement, had gone eerily quiet, colleagues and contacts suddenly unavailable. The entertainment news cycle, which moved at the speed of light, had already branded him the executive who fired Clint Eastwood for being old. Reynolds poured himself another coffee, his third of the morning, and scrolled through the continued fallout. Variety had published an op-ed titled, "When Algorithms Replace Artistry, Hollywood's New Crisis." The Hollywood Reporter featured interviews with veteran actors sharing their own experiences with ageism. Most damaging was the open letter signed by 50 prominent directors pledging to prioritize working with studios that respect the full spectrum of creative voices, regardless of age. His doorbell rang, startling him from his digital spiral. On his doorstep stood Jessica, his former assistant, clutching a cardboard box. "Your personal items," she explained awkwardly, handing him the container. "I thought you might want them before they disappeared into storage." Reynolds accepted the box. "Thanks, that was thoughtful." Jessica hesitated before adding, "The office is chaos. Ms. Chen has called an all-hands meeting for tomorrow. Rumor has it she's bringing in interim leadership." She lowered her voice. "Everyone's saying it'll be Marcus Taylor." Reynolds winced. Marcus Taylor was old-school Hollywood, a contemporary of Spielberg who had mentored many successful executives, including Margaret Chen herself. His appointment would signal a complete repudiation of Reynolds' data-driven approach. "Jessica, be honest. Was I wrong about Eastwood? The analytics clearly showed younger leads perform better in the global market." She considered the question carefully. The data wasn't wrong, but maybe it was incomplete. Numbers can tell you what is happening, but not always why. She glanced at her watch. "I should go. Good luck, Alexander." After she left, Reynolds sat with the box of office mementos, awards, photographs, the sleek nameplate that had adorned his door, symbols of a meteoric rise now marked by an equally spectacular fall. His phone pinged with a text from his agent. "Call me ASAP. Your reputation needs immediate damage control." Reputation, the word echoed in his mind. In an industry built on relationships, he had just burned bridges with some of its most respected figures. All for what? Adherence to algorithms that failed to measure the intangible value of experience? He was still contemplating this when his phone rang again, an unfamiliar number with a Carmel area code. "Curious," he answered. "Reynolds." His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Mr. Reynolds." The unmistakable gravelly tone of Clint Eastwood filled the line. "Got a minute to talk?" Reynolds nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Eastwood, Yes, of course." "Heard about your situation," Eastwood continued, his tone neutral. "Seems you're having a rough day." Reynolds laughed humorlessly. "You could say that, though I'd imagine you're not particularly sympathetic." "Actually," Eastwood replied, "that's why I'm calling. I'd like to meet. In person." The request was so unexpected that Reynolds found himself agreeing before fully processing the implications. They arranged to meet at a small, nondescript diner in Malibu, the kind of place celebrities went when they didn't want to be seen. As Reynolds hung up, confusion replaced his dejection. Why would Eastwood want to meet with him now? The diner was nearly empty when Reynolds arrived, save for a few locals and, in the farthest booth, the unmistakable silhouette of Clint Eastwood. The actor acknowledged him with a slight nod as Reynolds approached and slid into the opposite seat. Appreciate you coming, Eastwood said, pushing aside his nearly empty coffee cup. Reynolds studied the man before him, the very figure whose dismissal had cost him everything. Up close, without the filtered lens of algorithms and projections, he saw not just age, but gravitas. The lines on Eastwood's face weren't just years, they were experiences, stories, wisdom, earned through decades in an unforgiving industry. I should be thanking you for the invitation, Reynolds replied, though I admit I'm confused about why you'd want to see me. Eastwood signaled the waitress for more coffee. Been in this business a long time, seen executives rise and fall, good ones, bad ones, ones who think they've reinvented the wheel. His eyes, sharp and clear, fixed on Reynolds. You're not the first young hotshot to bet against experience and lose. Reynolds bristled slightly. With respect, my decision wasn't personal. The data dash. Can't measure everything worth knowing, Eastwood interrupted. That's the trouble with your generation. You think if something can't be quantified, it doesn't exist. The waitress arrived with fresh coffee, giving Reynolds a moment to compose his thoughts. So, you called me here to lecture me? I've already lost my job, my reputation. Isn't that enough? Eastwood's expression softened slightly. Actually, I called because I saw potential in that script you sent. Legacy. Good story about redemption, about a man facing his own obsolescence. He paused. Reminded me of someone. Reynolds blinked in surprise. You still want to discuss the project, after everything? I've been offered the directing chair, Eastwood revealed. Global's giving me creative control, full budget, my choice of cast and crew. The revelation hit Reynolds like a physical blow. Not only had he lost his position, but his flagship project was now in the hands of the very man he'd dismissed. Congratulations, he managed. It's a good property. Eastwood studied him for a long moment. Know what separates lasting success from fleeting relevance in this town? It's not youth or even talent. It's humility, the wisdom to recognize when you've been wrong. Reynolds stared into his coffee. I misjudged you, misjudged the situation. I was so convinced by the patterns in our data that I missed the human element. That's a start, Eastwood nodded. Now here's why I really called you. I'm offering you a consulting position on legacy. Reynolds' head snapped up. What? You understand the numbers, the market trends. That knowledge has value, Eastwood explained, but it needs to be balanced with experience, with the human touch that algorithms can't capture. Why would you do this, after how I treated you? Because holding grudges is exhausting, Eastwood replied with the hint of a smile, and because the best stories, on screen and in life, are about redemption, about people learning from their mistakes. For the first time since his dismissal, Reynolds felt a flicker of hope, not just for his career, but for a genuine understanding of what he'd missed in his data-driven pursuit of success. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, Eastwood stood, placing a few bills on the table. Studio lot, Monday morning. We'll see if there's a way forward that honors both innovation and tradition. As Eastwood walked away, Reynolds remained seated, turning over this unexpected lifeline in his mind. The man he had deemed too old, too irrelevant for modern audiences, had just demonstrated a depth of character his algorithms had failed to predict. The irony wasn't lost on him, nor was the opportunity for genuine growth from his spectacular fall. Outside the diner, the clouds had begun to break, thin streams of sunlight penetrating the gray cover. A fitting metaphor, Reynolds thought, for the unexpected clarity emerging from his darkest professional moment. The transformation of Alexander Reynolds began not with grand gestures, but with small moments of humility. His first day on the set of Legacy found him sitting quietly in the background, a notepad in hand, rather than his usual tablet. Clint Eastwood had given him a chance few in Hollywood would have offered, the opportunity to rebuild from the ruins of his own hubris. The production had taken over a weathered police station in downtown Los Angeles, its faded brick and vintage architecture perfect for the story of an aging detective confronting both a cold case and his own mortality. Reynolds watched as Eastwood moved through the set with quiet authority, consulting with the cinematographer about lighting that would enhance rather than hide the character's age. We're not running from the wrinkles, Eastwood explained to the crew. They're battle scars. They tell the story before a single line of dialogue. Reynolds jotted this down, struck by how completely it contradicted his former approach. He had once insisted that signs of aging be minimized through lighting, makeup, and post-production effects. Eastwood was doing the opposite, embracing authenticity as a storytelling tool. When the day's shooting wrapped, Reynolds found himself invited to the daily footage review. He sat in the back of the darkened room as Eastwood and his longtime editor examined the day's work. The scene showed the protagonist returning to his old precinct, younger officers barely recognizing the legend who had once commanded the room. "That's the take," Eastwood said simply when a particular version played. No lengthy analysis, no committee decision, just the instinctive recognition of truth captured on film. "How did you know?" Reynolds asked afterward, genuinely curious. "What made that take different?" Eastwood considered the question. "The eyes. In the first few takes, I was acting tired. In that one, I was remembering being tired. There's a difference." This pattern continued for weeks. Reynolds absorbed silent lessons in the art of filmmaking that no algorithm could quantify. The value of intuition, the power of lived experience, the subtle difference between portraying emotion and channeling it from memory. He filled notebooks with observations not about market trends or demographic preferences, but about the human elements that connected stories to audiences. Mid-production, Margaret Chen visited the set. Reynolds tensed when he saw her, their last interaction still an open wound. But she greeted him with professional courtesy, pulling him aside after observing a complex scene. "Clint tells me you've been an asset," she said, her tone measured. "Says you found ways to integrate audience insights without compromising artistic integrity." Reynolds nodded cautiously. "I'm learning to balance the data with the intangibles." "That was always the missing piece," Chen replied, not dismissing analytics, but understanding their limitations. She handed him a folder. "The board is discussing restructuring Pinnacle's leadership. We're considering creating a new position focused on bridging traditional storytelling with modern audience analysis. I'd like your thoughts on the proposal." The gesture wasn't forgiveness or full restoration, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that his perspective still held value when tempered with humility. As Chen left, Eastwood approached, having observed the exchange. "Good things happen when pride steps aside," the director remarked. "Industry's changing, but some principles remain constant: respect, humility, learning from those who walk the path before you." The shoot continued through changing seasons, the production schedule extended to accommodate Eastwood's measured, deliberate directing style. Reynolds, once obsessed with efficiency metrics and production timelines, found himself appreciating the value of patience. Some scenes required 20 takes, others just one, each decision guided not by formula, but by a sensitivity to authentic moments that couldn't be scheduled or forced. When principal photography finally wrapped, the traditional champagne celebration felt like more than just another production milestone. For Reynolds, it marked the completion of a parallel journey, from arrogant certainty to thoughtful consideration, from dismissing experience to honoring it. 6 months later, the Hollywood premiere of Legacy transformed Grauman's Chinese theater into a celebration of cinema across generations. Young stars mingled with veteran actors, the red carpet a visual testament to the industry's full spectrum of talent. Reynolds stood to the side, watching Eastwood greet admirers with the same unhurried grace he brought to every aspect of his craft. "Nervous?" The question came from Jessica, his former assistant, now working in Pinnacle's revamped development department. "Terrified," Reynolds admitted. "Early social media response has been positive, but traditional critics haven't weighed in yet." Jessica smiled. "Strange to hear you worried about critics when you used to say they were irrelevant compared to algorithm predictions." "I've learned to value different perspectives," he replied. "Data tells part of the story, but not all of it." Inside the theater, Reynolds sat through the film with growing amazement. The story he had once deemed unmarketable to younger audiences unfolded with universal resonance. Eastwood's performance as the aging detective transcended demographics, his vulnerability and strength speaking to fundamental human experiences that crossed generational lines. When the credits rolled, the standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. critics and audience members alike were visibly moved, many wiping away tears as they applauded. Reynolds found himself emotional for reasons beyond the film's reception. He was witnessing the power of what he had nearly dismissed, the impact of a story told with the depth that only experience could bring. At the after-party, Reynolds finally found a moment to speak privately with Eastwood, who was entertaining well-wishers with characteristic understatement. The audience response, across all demographics, "It's extraordinary," Reynolds said. "My projections never predicted this kind of universal appeal." Eastwood nodded. "Some things don't fit into spreadsheets. Human connection, shared experience, the recognition of our own mortality." He sipped his drink. "That's what stories have always been about, since people gathered around fires in caves." Reynolds smiled ruefully. "I almost robbed audiences of this film because I couldn't see past my own biases." "But you didn't," Eastwood countered. "You learned. That's the difference between a mistake and a failure. One of them teaches you something worth knowing." As the celebration continued around them, Reynolds recognized that his greatest professional setback had become his most valuable education. He had lost a title but gained perspective. He had fallen from the heights of corporate power but discovered something more substantial in the humility of learning. The following week, Margaret Chen announced Reynolds' appointment to a newly created position at Global Media, Executive Vice President of Creative Analytics Integration. His mandate was to develop frameworks that balance data-driven insights with creative instinct and experience to build bridges between the industry's past wisdom and its future innovation. In his first address to the Pinnacle staff, Reynolds began with a story about his encounter with Clint Eastwood, not as an anecdote about celebrity, but as a parable about respect and redemption. He spoke about the false dichotomy between youth and experience, between innovation and tradition. He shared what he had learned about the limitations of algorithms in capturing the full spectrum of human connection. "Our industry doesn't need to choose between data and intuition," he concluded. "The most powerful stories emerge when we honor both, when we recognize that some forms of value can be measured, while others can only be felt." As Reynolds finished speaking, he noticed Eastwood standing at the back of the room, having arrived quietly to witness this final act of transformation. The director offered a simple nod, acknowledgement of a journey completed and a new one beginning. In that moment, Reynolds understood that true legacy isn't built on youth or algorithms, but on the wisdom to recognize when you've been wrong and the courage to chart a better course forward.